Hey, feeling good, like I should. When in dark, I walk around the neighborhood. Feeling blessed, never stressed. Got that sunshine on my Sunday best. Yeah, hey, every day can be a better day despite the challenge. All you gotta do is leave it better than you found it. It's gonna get difficult to stand, but hold your balance. I just say whatever, cause there is no way you're around it. Everyone falls down sometimes, but you just gotta know it'll all be fine. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Hey, feeling good, like I should. When in dark, I walk around the neighborhood. Feeling blessed, never stressed. Got that sunshine on my Sunday best.
All right, let's get started. Hi, guys. My name is Danielle McGee. I'm an educational technologist. I have been in the education profession for about a little over 15 to 16 years, and I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of different school districts and businesses and universities as far as setting up a learning design that would be beneficial for those that they serve, whether they were students, non-traditional students, parents working, or those in the workforce, when we've done some of the training facilitations for some of the workforce. So this session today is about blended learning, and the portion of blended learning that we're going to talk about today is specifically hybrid learning. Now, we don't know for sure what education will look like in the future, but one thing's for sure, and that's the need to adapt and evolve. So the pandemic, it shuttered schools across the globe, and lessons, some of which were very hard, were learned, and that's speaking for myself included. So, as reentry planning either begins or continues for some of us, because some of us hadn't had any time off. So, as it begins or continues for some of us, one of the top priorities must be to transform learning into more ways that provide kids with the best experience possible, while also ensuring that their safety is top priority as well. So it goes without saying that this is no small feat. I mean, we know what you're up against as educators. So hopefully during this brief session, I'll be able to outline a few specific focus areas and strategies in no particular order or anything like that, that can kind of help to usher in a new and better normal for you and your school district. So let's go ahead and get started with some of the info that we have here. So if you've been in quarantine, I'm sure you all have seen many of the famous and infamous versus battles or funny videos and TikToks. So I have one of my favorite comedians on here, which is Les Jones, and one of my favorite artists, which is Teddy Riley. So if you remember, and I love Les Jones because, Les Jordan, because he always adds in a little extra to his comedic TikToks and Snapchats that he puts out there. But if you watch the versus battle, if you remember Teddy Riley, he came prepared. But sometimes we can tend to over prepare. And what I find a lot of instructors doing is overwhelming both themselves and their students by trying to provide a lot of information or a lot of different forms of technology. And yes, technology is good, but when it's overused, sometimes you can kind of lose the buy-in of both the instructors and the students. So this question is especially pertinent throughout the country right now, since many administrations, like those at a number of campuses across the world, are quite interested in encouraging more of their instructional staff to take advantage of. What is it called? Blended learning? Is it blended learning? Is it hybrid courses? Is it flip courses? Is it face-to-face? Is it face-to-face plus online? Is it synchronous? Is it asynchronous? So there are a lot of questions that need to be answered and addressed as you prepare and plan for this new normal that we're facing. So let's take a look at this here. Now, a lot of times people will interchange some of the verbiage or terminology. So at first sight, hybrid learning and blended learning may seem the same, and many of us like to use those terms interchangeably, but that's definitely not the case. So we're going to define what these terms mean and what they kind of work as. So blended learning focuses on the combination between online learning and offline learning. Now, one of the best strategies to personalize learning for students is blended learning. Now, blended instruction is what the teacher does with technology. It's also where the students use technology to have control over their learning path, or where they're learning, which is their learning place, or their learning pace, how fast they're going, as far as their learning. And you'll find that a lot with student-centered instruction as well. Now, the key here is to focus on student pedagogical strategies that will help to ensure that the students are actually improving their learning outcomes. So everything may not work the same for each student, and that's where hybrid learning comes in. So whereas hybrid learning is all about finding the right mix for you or that student out of all the possibilities in learning. So no matter if they are offline or online. So some of the students in a hybrid course, they may do everything online. Some of the students in a hybrid course may do a little bit online and a lot face-to-face, or they may be doing a lot face-to-face and a little online, or a little face-to-face and a lot online. So it's pretty much the mix of whatever works for you. So if you look at this in a visual stance, I'm a visual learner. So if you look at this in a visual stance, you have a number of different types of blenders. You have the neutral bullet, you have the regular commercial blenders, and then you have the infusion type blenders. That's what blended learning is. But what hybrid learning is actually one of those buttons on that blender. What type of blended learning are you focused on? So that's what hybrid learning is. So if you look at this image here, if you tailor your hybrid learning to those students that you're serving, your outcome is going to be pretty tasty. So if you put all the ingredients and all the things that you need to make sure that your hybrid instruction is pertinent to what those students need, make sure you have your spinach for strength, or make sure you have your right technology, to push your outcomes that you want, or make sure you have the right strategies for making sure that the students are grasping this information, or the right remediation terms that they need. So as many of us are seeing, we're really having to make some much needed adjustments to the way we teach and the way our students learn, which is good, because this is actually preparing them for an ever-changing society and workforce. Because if you look at the data shows us that a lot of our students are preparing for a workforce that doesn't even exist right now. So we have to make sure that we're teaching them how to be problem solvers, critical thinkers, so they can come up with their own solutions when they don't have a solution to go and look up. Because right now, a lot of our students are just-in-time learners. Now, I grew up in a time where we were taught to be just-in-case learners. We were given a lot of information that we probably didn't need or probably wouldn't use, and I had a lot of peers, including myself, saying, hey, why are we learning about the Pythagorean theorem? I'm not going to use this. But not knowing that, hey, I would use some of those concepts to figure out solutions to problems down the line as an engineer or as a user designer or anything like that. So a lot of times our main focus shouldn't really always be the content, but it should be focused on teaching our students processes about how to think critically and how to use their computational thinking skills and things like that, so they can figure out solutions as they prepare for jobs that we don't know how to teach them for because they don't exist right now. So, although different blended and hybrid instruction does share some similarities in what it may take to make effective instruction work, that may be, sometimes face-to-face instruction. It may be virtual classrooms. It may be webinars, whether they're either synchronous or asynchronous. It may be links to resources. It may be simulations. It may be some group activities that you want to incorporate, or some group projects to kind of maintain that social connection, because a lot of our students are kind of losing those social connections that some of them thrive on or need, in order to move throughout. So we do want to incorporate some group projects and activities in some of our activities that we provide. Also, we want to make sure that we're providing some assessments, and an assessment doesn't necessarily have to be a 20-question assessment. It can be just a quick question. Hey, can you explain to me if you understand this? And that may be different for different students. It may be, hey, create a poster board showing your explanation of this project or this process. It may be something totally different from one student to the next, because we have students that are visual expressors, we have students that are auditory expressors, and then we have some that are tangible, that need to build or create something to show, hey, I understand what you're saying, but I may not be able to answer, hey, this is answer A, this is answer B, this is answer C. Because me, myself, I'm not a very good test taker, but I can explain something to you all day long. So make sure you provide assessments that will kind of tailor to some of your varying learning styles that you may be serving. And even one-on-one coaching or remediation. A lot of times I find that with hybrid instruction or blended learning, there is an opportunity for more one-on-one coaching, whereas some of the students that wouldn't necessarily ask questions in a face-to-face course, they feel more comfortable now that they are or they have that connection with that instructor to ask more questions or get more one-on-one coaching or feedback. So let's go on to the next one. All right, so like many of you, I have quickly become overwhelmed by a flood of acronyms and meanings for all these different terms, and more convinced that they are being tossed around without much consensus about, what they mean in terms of instructional quality or course structure. Saying that your course, utilizes blended learning may, elicit a lot of approving nods from your administrators and your other staff members, but structure doesn't always create a strong and magical pedagogy, for your instructional strategies. So I think it's important for us as educators or education professionals to remember that it's our job to mix and match and pick and choose from the tools that we have available and make them work to kind of meet the needs of the students that we're serving, in front of us. I mean, as education professionals, we're in the business of fundamental human relations, with a little bit of tech assistance. I know a lot of times people like to rely on the tech assistance, but at the end of the day, if you're a good teacher, you're going to be a good teacher. Technology is not going to make you that much more of a better teacher than you already were. So you have to have some strategies to be able to relate to your students or your clients that you're serving if you're in the workforce. All right, so I know plenty of you all have probably heard of synchronous and asynchronous, and sometimes we get those terms a little confused. So let's go over what that consists of and what that means. So what's the difference between synchronous learning and asynchronous learning? All right, so let's go. Synchronous learning is online or distance education that happens in real time. So sometimes this will be displayed in something like a Zoom webinar or a Microsoft Teams webinar. And sometimes you may have some students or even teachers who just need that synchronous connection. They need some real-time feedback from their peers that they're working with. I mean, whether it's face-to-face or everyone jumping in on their webcam or something, at the same time, almost like a Brady Bunch style. Everybody's little pictures showing up and everybody can see and make that social connection. And once you completed the main lecture or dialogue, you could even go as far as placing your students into some small group breakout rooms and either share handouts or readings for them to discuss further, and then you all come back and meet at the same initial Zoom meeting and discuss those that feedback that you all had in the breakout rooms. So being able to integrate tools such as Adobe Connect, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, etc., with some of your LMSs, which are things like Canvas, Blackboard, Google Classroom, that has allowed me to teach, or provide trainings without really having to seriously think about or consider how the online environment has, or might have changed my way of instruction. So whereas, with asynchronous learning, this occurs through online channels. Now, you may not be communicating at the same time or in real time, but what you're doing here is pretty much, for instance, you're typing in a response on a discussion board, and they may come back later and respond later, but you're not actually responding directly back to each other. So in this scenario, the instructor may post a pre-recorded session, and the groups can still go off into discussing resources that were provided or continue doing more research. So some examples of some asynchronous learning would be, well, not asynchronous. Let's do some examples of some synchronous learning. So let me show you this slide here. And I don't know which one is going to be a bit better. Okay, this is a little better to see. Okay, some synchronous examples here are things like your chat, and some common uses are people want to ask questions throughout a presentation, or that you can use it for discussion prompts. You can also use it to respond to your peers in your class, or to your students, or if you're a student, you can respond to your instructor. You can share different insights or resources and links and things like that. A lot of times I'll post a link into my chat sessions so everyone would have access to that as we're going through our Zoom meetings. Just a host of information or feedback that could be shared through the chat. Some other synchronous interaction could be doing polls or surveys throughout the course, and you can get that immediate feedback, on opinions and whether some of your students or other staff members understand what you may be going through during your Zoom presentation. And then the breakout rooms, which I mentioned before, you can use this as centers to you can create virtual centers where you can kind of separate groups into small breakout rooms and allow them to brainstorm or prioritize some different things and make plans and further discuss information that you all may be going over. Now, I also list, even though I list some of the advantages, I also list some of the issues that it may cause. Sometimes people say, when you're working in the chat, your screen may move too quickly and they may miss something, and it may be overwhelming and distracting. Me, myself, sometimes I minimize my chat so I don't see a lot of things going on at one time, so I don't get distracted. As far as polls, that's pretty much just like chats. Breakout rooms, it can be a little complex and intimidating when you first start using it, but as you use it more and more, it's a bit easier. Now, there will be some technical difficulties at times, depending on the machine you're using, your internet accessibility options, and different things like that. And it can be a bit time consuming depending on how large your group is and how long it may take to facilitate those groups. Some other synchronous interactions are things like screen sharing, where I'm sharing my presentation with you all now so you can kind of follow along and see where we're going. I'm more of a visual learner, so I like to be able to share kind of where I'm going with my participants or my students that I may be working with. So those are some examples for you there. And let's move along. All right. So this is a difficult one for pretty much everyone. Changing thought processes and, the difficulty in changing those thought processes. It's important that if we haven't already, that we begin seriously thinking about our core pedagogical beliefs and the extent to which we provide our students with the kind of education they deserve. And that, and that many of us stand for, through the use of various online learning management systems. And sometimes that's referred to as LMSs. And those are your Canvas, your Blackboard, your Google Classroom, your Edmodo, your PowerSchool Unified Classroom. So there's a host of different learning management systems that you can use, or LMSs that you can use. And in doing that, I've realized that, like some of you, I too have a long way to go. Even though I've been working with educational technology a little over 15 to 16 years, change is difficult. And I promise you it's hard. You ask my eating habits. One day I say, hey, I'm going to change the way I do this, but hey, that cake looks good, or that powdered donut looks good. So change is difficult to do, but I've tried to manage additional ways to turn my constant use of online tools into some of my ingrained ways of doing things, instead of taking advantage of the capabilities of the new tools, and what they afford, in order to help my teaching and instructional processes blossom and help me, take my core beliefs even farther into the digital age that's here and that's ever changing. So I want to be able to make sure that I'm providing instruction in a way that, my students or the clients that I serve deem beneficial, because I don't want to teach in a process that is not going to grasp their attention and cause them to lose focus. So we have to be willing to make change, and whether that change is gradual or not, you have to be willing to make some of those changes and change your thought processes towards doing that. All right, so this is a good one here. Whatever it takes. So some of you all have probably heard some of the old mottos of Kobe Bryant. He would say, whatever it takes, if it means me being on the sideline, shaking my towel, pushing my team member on, getting a bottle of water for my team member. I don't always have to be in the spotlight. Whatever it takes to make it work is what we're willing to do. And when you sign up as an education professional, that should be one of your mottos. Whatever it takes to make sure that our students learn what they need to learn, I'm willing to do that. So business as usual just won't cut it right now, especially right now. The lessons learned during COVID-19, it provided opportunities to re-envision what schools can be and possibly what they should be or should have been prior to now. But now it's kind of forcing some of us to go ahead and make those changes that we should have probably made prior to now. But, now efforts have to be made. We have to push forward in developing a practical path forward for our students, our administrative teams, and different things like that. So what might this look like going forward? A lot of us have that question. Now, my thinking as of lately has been around a hybrid learning model or a hybrid learning structure. At this point, they are just thoughts, but, it can be a powerful catalyst or a powerful change, to initiating and sustaining a transformation, of education at scale. So right now, my thoughts are leaning more towards a hybrid learning model, whatever it takes. The premise, is not only to, incorporate what has been learned up to this point, but also during one of the most disruptive times in history, but to also perceive what may come next. So with this hybrid structure, we really don't know. Everybody's in a stance of we don't know. So that's why I feel like the hybrid would really work best for a lot of our educational platforms and our students that we're working with. So failing to prepare for the unknown or addressing a slew of challenges that arose when schools were previously closed in the spring, means that nothing was learned. I mean, we've had a little time to kind of prep and make some adjustments and make some changes, which a lot of us should have already had some plans to move towards more distance learning. But with this recent pandemic, it's kind of forced us to kind of go ahead and make those changes as needed for our students and kind of prep them, because this is going to be the world that they're living in. The premises of a hybrid learning model is to combine our traditional and non-traditional methodologies to improve education while also ensuring that high quality quality learning for all kids is the golden standard. We want to make sure that we're providing the same, if not more, education for our students as needed. You know, we want everyone to have top standard access to education. So to start a workable definition, you know, you must be established to begin creating a vision for this model. So hopefully you all have some teams in place that are kind of working to move the vision forward, create the vision and move the vision forward. So let's take this definition from a research journal that I was reading. It's called Learning Technologies. And what it defines, it says hybrid learning combines both face-to-face and online teaching into one cohesive experience. So approximately half of the class, you know, may have students that are working online. That may not sound, you know, like a cut and dry formula. A lot of planning is needed to kind of ensure that the hybrid works well. I mean, it may not look the same for each school, even though each school may say, hey, we're doing hybrid. Some may do more of a focus on face-to-face and some may do more of a focus on online. So it's going to be a bit different. So a lot of planning is needed to ensure that the hybrid planning works well. So allowing its two formats to capitalize on each other's strengths. So there's a lot more detail that goes into developing something of this magnitude, and you're not going to get it all done during this first week or this first month. It's going to take some time, especially if you hadn't already been working on it. So hybrid in the context of this presentation, you know, represents the combination, like I said, of two or more different things. So some might argue that education has always embraced this approach, but yeah, it has to some extent, but not totally, but definitely not scaled in a way that has led to a system-wide transformation as it is right now. So with the inherent challenges ahead, you know, a uniform hybrid model is necessary for success. So I would advise you all to get you some team members, and you want a good balance. You want some ed tech folks on there. You want some strategy folks on there. You want some different focuses so you can get those different perspectives for what a school year may look like using this hybrid method in your area. All right, so here I have a little visual, and this image here kind of helps us visualize what this could look like as school begins to transform, you know, teaching, learning, and leadership roles. Now, okay, in the very top here, you'll see where we have face-to-face as a focus. And it's not a matter of if, but it's when kids return to school. The most important relationship for students, you know, they form through interaction with their teachers, their administrators, and their peers. You know, in most cases, the consensus is that high quality instruction and effective pedagogy are facilitated best when educators are physically with their students. The key is to utilize this time a little bit better, though. So face-to-face would be one of the top add-ins into hybrid learning. That doesn't necessarily have to be directly in our face, but like I said earlier, you can use some of those other platforms such as Zoom or Microsoft Teams and Google Hangout and different things like that. So let's take a look at personalization. So personalized learning, it represents a movement from the what as far as the content, the curriculum, the test assessments, you know, the different programs, the technology you may have, to the who as a means of facilitating, you know, the student ownership of the learning process. So we kind of want our students to take on a constructive approach to where they're becoming the facilitator of their own learning. And this is where a lot of us are going to have to take a step back. And I like to use the phrase where we become the guide on the side instead of the sage on the stage. You know, a lot of times, a lot of us are used to providing instruction in a manner where we're giving out all of the information. But with the world that we're moving towards now, we have to have our students ready for critical thinking. And in order for them to do that, we have to make sure that they're taking on this constructive approach to where they're scaffolding their own educational process and how they pace and learn the content that's needed to learn. So I know I got off track on that. So this consists of, high agency strategies that focus on, voice, choice, their path, their pace, and place, both with and without technology. And like I said earlier, we don't always want to focus on just technology. We have to teach our students strategies for learning content both with technology and without. So this helps to create a more personal learning experience for all students. At the forefront is developing and sustaining a culture that imparts, purpose, meaning, relevance, ownership, and that's that constructive piece that I was talking about again, allowing our students to control their own learning and their own pace. And also various paths that kind of cater to both their strengths and their weaknesses, of all of our students that we're serving. So it's critical to come to a consensus as to what this then means in the context of teaching, learning, and leadership. Common vision, language, and expectations, matter if the goal is to move beyond these buzzwords. I know a lot of us like to take these buzzwords and just run with them, but it has to have some meat and potato to hold for our students to get those learning outcomes that they need. So this is just a visual of, what personalization or personalized learning looks like. So at the beginning of it, hey, what don't I know? What do I need to figure out? And then you go to, how do I learn this? What process do I need to go through to figure out what I need to figure out? And this is where we're teaching them about their critical thinking skills or their computational learning skills. And then the last part of this cycle is, how did I do? Did I get it right? Did I get close enough? And this is where you can incorporate a lot of project-based learning or activities to kind of tailor to each student, because a lot of times, even though students are learning the same thing, they express those things a little bit differently. So this may be where you want to try to incorporate a lot of different project-based learning activities. So at the end of the day, we want their learning outcomes to be the same, and we want all of these things to align, but sometimes it may be expressed a little bit differently. All right, so let's take a look at learning environments. The learning environment makes or breaks personalized learning. It's impacted by school culture, it's impacted by leadership decisions at both the administrator and the teacher levels, such as policies, procedures, schedules, and facilities, that all learners, it treats all learners as unique individuals. All these different things affect these individuals differently. So it's important that we, and this could both include where and when, kids learn, learning environments. So I have this visual in here, and a lot of times we mix up the term equality and equity, even though we're providing the same things to the students the same, sometimes the students need something a little bit different to make sure equity is actually being enforced or provided, to make sure that they're getting what their need, what their need may be at the moment. So, I mean, you can't provide for Johnny what Billy may need. Billy may need 2 steps up the ladder to see the same thing that Johnny may need at 1 step. So a lot of times our learning environments need to change. So technology can, in many cases, be a central component, but it doesn't always have to be, because we also have to, remember that everyone's reality is not the same. Some people are not going to have that access that some students have. So some specific examples of learning environments that cater to more personalized approaches, they may include, flexible classrooms, spaces, innovative schedules, no bells, maybe some virtual courses, even some work study or internship programs if you're working at a university or junior college level. You have some academies, which is something one of the schools that I'm working with is going to implement during this next coming school year. Some academies or small learning communities where students can build that cohort type of group or connection with their peers. Even some outdoor classes or spaces, field trips. Right now, many of us are implementing virtual field trips through tools like Nearpod or Google VR, and Erasmus, I think, is another one that may be out there for virtual field trips. But you can create a host of different things there, and you can bring your own devices. Can be considered a form of creating your own learning environments. I think I went over augmented and virtual reality. I'm trying not to leave anything out. But the key takeaway here is that personalized learning is much more than what just happens in a classroom or the use of a tech-based tool. The right culture has to be in place to create a learning environment that's conducive to, unleashing the genius and talents of all kids, all of our students. We don't want to leave anyone behind. So this means, focusing both on equity and social and emotional learning when needed. So it's important that we try to reach students where they are, because not everyone's reality is the same. So it's important that we not just focus on, hey, we're providing this equipment to all these students, but you're not providing additional training that one student may need. So it's important that we focus on both equity and social, emotional needs, for our students during this time as well, to make sure that their learning environment is conducive to being effective for them down the line. All right, I don't know why I had this in here again, but let's keep going. All right, so this picture represents this this next key, which is being adaptable. This represents adaptive learning tools. So if you know anything about a chameleon, they can change their body to match any environment that they're working in. So as educators, we have to be adaptable, because you have a lot of things that are pushed out monthly, yearly, and you have to be able to change according to what those different benchmarks or what those different goals may be. And pretty much now everyone is being forced to be adaptable, from the educators to the students. So the success of a hybrid model does in part rely on the purposeful and strategic use of technology. Even though it's not the main frame, it does rely on it. So we can't just be out here, throwing products and services to our teachers and students all willy-nilly, just, because instead of using them, many will push them aside if they feel overwhelmed. I know it's easy to say, hey, this is a great tool, this is great, but when you have 20 different products and you're pushing all that on a student or an instructor, that can be a lot. So what I encourage you all to do is find several that work and not push so many at one time, because I know if I feel overwhelmed with something, I'll just push it off and say I don't even want to deal with it. So these can be instrumental in providing, needed or supplemental support to close achievement gaps, provide remediation, provide independent practice, help learners move ahead. If they're already mastered in certain other content, they can continue to move ahead using some of these tools. Blended pathways tends to be one of the best options for the seamless integration of adaptive learning tools. And you have a lot of different, I don't want to go to calling company names, but you have a lot of different companies that will kind of help you as far as gauging where your students are and working from that area. You have things like iReady, Compass Learning, Compass Odyssey, and Achieve 3000. So you all would have to kind of evaluate that and make your own determination as to what would work best for you and your students or your instructional staff. But you do want to find some good products that will kind of help as far as being adaptive in the learning space. All right, let's cover social distancing. this is what it's looking like, y'all. I mean, we're just trying to come up with a plan. We really don't know where we're headed right now, but we're just trying to come up with something. So, with new and potential clusters of COVID-19 appearing, many schools across the globe, will be mandated to implement social distancing measures. And hopefully they've already started, thinking of plans to do that. A hybrid model accounts for this fact, being that you can kind of tailor it to the way that you want. And its success relies both on budgeting, existing space redesign, professional learning and support. So with this, a lot of our schools are going to have to be trying to find money to make sure that we have enough items, to make sure that we have enough space to distance our children, or make sure that we're providing professional development for our teachers and our students and our parents, when they do go home and have to use these different tools. So this is where you're going to depend heavily on your instructional technology and other professional development staff to kind of get information and training out to not only your teachers and administrators, but also your students and your parents, because like I've said, in several of the slides before, this is going to be a new normal for everyone. So if we train and prepare everyone properly, hopefully this will assist in the a smoother transition as we move forward with social distancing. So you may want to jot this down on during your vision planning committee for moving forward with this hybrid model or blended learning strategy. All right, so let's take a look at flexible schedules. Now, the premise behind any hybrid learning model is altering the traditional school day schedule and calendar, for that matter, to make the best use of your time and your resources during that time. So flexible scheduling, it gives schools the opportunity to optimize, both their time, their space, their staff, and their facilities. And it also allows them to add that variety to their curriculum offerings and their teaching strategy that's needed to kind of adjust as well. So pandemic or not, this is something that's actually long overdue. I know we're taught to stay inside the box or stay along the parallel, but with all that's going on, and my main focus that I've been preaching, preparing our students for the workforce, this is something that's definitely long overdue, being able to be flexible. And that ties back into the adaptable slide we were looking at earlier. So I'm trying to move along as fast as possible because I know your time is valuable, but let's take a look at remote learning. So distance and virtual are appropriate where all kids have access to a device and internet, but let's be realistic here. Not all of our students have that same reality. Not all of our students are going to have devices. Not all of our students are going to have access to the internet, or if they have access to the internet, it may not be up to speed to be on a Zoom call for 2 hours or an hour or 3 hours, or uploading large documents and different things like that. So remote, on the other hand, focuses more so on both the digital and the non-digital pathways to keep realistic learning going, because let's be realistic here, not everyone is going to have that device or access to the internet, like I stated before. So with social distancing and flexible schedules having a considerable role in any hybrid learning model, the need to adequately prepare for and implement remote learning while ensuring equity is extremely important. So I know a lot of times we want to just say remote learning is all digital, but remote is pretty much being able to make an environment conducive to learning no matter where you are, whether you're sitting outside at the lunch table, or if you're in a classroom, just making sure that our students are able to learn in any area. or with any type of device, or whether they have a device or not. So, like I said before, pandemic or not, it's long overdue. Let's go on to wrap it up. So at the end of the day, I'll echo what many others have said. Maslow's before Bloom's. If you don't know, look it up. Look up some infographics and it'll provide some more details. But let's use our heads here. Above all else, we need to make sure that each and every person in our school system feels safe, and measures are taken to both prevent and address any COVID-19 issues. And that goes for our staff, our administrators, our instructional staff, our students, our parents, those that are serving our school district. Our top focus right now is to make sure that we're making everyone feel as safe as possible. So, as I stated previously, these are just some ideas that are floating around, in my head. What I do know is that learner and educator success, going forward, it will rely heavily on hybrid learning models, and blended structures. So business as usual in the face of, the current challenges that we're having and those lurking in the shadows down the road that we hadn't even seen, has given all of us kind of a golden opportunity to kind of transform education in the way that we've always done things, because it, like I said earlier, it's something that's long overdue. I mean, we're still teaching at the desk when some of us have to get beyond the walls. And my intention was actually to be outside today, but my internet connection wasn't working quite well, so I wanted to use that as a little analogy. But if you're looking at my photo now, you see my dream vacation was to be in Indonesia, Bali, somewhere, this year. But hey, I brought it to me since we have all this going on. But I got off track on what I was talking about. But my hope is that schools take this information and run with it, and use it at our advantage to kind of change and transform the way we do education right now. Get along the lines of what our students are used to seeing when they go home. It's sad that a lot of times home is where a lot of learning or instruction takes place more naturally. I won't say takes place because they're learning when they're at the schoolhouse as well, but they're learning naturally at home because they're picking up devices, they're doing things, or they're creating things at home without even realizing, hey, I'm going through a learning process here. So hopefully this will serve as an advantage or an opportunity for some of us to change education and the way we do or provide instruction to our students or our staff if we're in the workforce. So that concludes my presentation. I tried to run through it as quickly as possible because this is usually a little bit longer, but I think we were limited to being under 20 to 30 minutes. So I wanted to make sure I allowed enough time for any questions and answers. So yeah, blended and hybrid learning are burning topics these days. So as a result of the current times, I hope many of you are thinking carefully about how to offer different sorts of experiences, both online and face-to-face, to your students, whenever we return, and trying to use your hesitations and stumbles with technology as teachable moments as we all engage and inquire about the possibilities and the potential of new learning tools during this new normal. So take it at advantage, and use it for your benefit. I'm curious to hear from some folks, what online learning tools have allowed you to do with your students, more that you probably wouldn't have done on a face-to-face setting. How has this helped you stay true to your pedagogical beliefs? How have your practices evolved since this all started? So if you want, you can add some of that into the chat. or if you have any additional questions that you want to ask, feel free to go ahead and ask them. But if not, I'm going to share my information with you guys in the chat, and you can feel free to reach me at techmeout2@gmail.com. And my name is Danielle McGee, and I'm an educational technologist, and I hope you were able to take away some key points today. If you have anything to share, please feel free to share. I think the links to this presentation will be provided after the session or after the conference this week. So feel free to get those links and share them out. My Twitter handle is @DannyGirl79, and that's DANIGYRL79. And I think you can also find me on LinkedIn as Danielle Williams McGee. So go ahead and share that information, and I appreciate you guys for tuning in today, and I hope you were able to take away some key points. And I've really enjoyed you all today. Thank you.
Feeling blessed, never stressed.